New Nintendo Switch games can be pricey, but you don't have to break the bank to get a solid physical collection. In this video, I'm going to talk about a bunch of titles that are under £20 in the UK and absolutely worth playing. So brew up a nice cup of tea and join me as I talk about some of my favourites. Now, to be fully transparent, all of these games are running on the Nintendo Switch and that's what I'm going to focus on. However, a lot of these titles will also be significantly cheaper on other consoles. It's up to you to decide whether or not you want them on the Nintendo Switch. But either way, treat this as a nice little hidden gem video for some titles that you may have skipped over when playing on your preferred console. The first title we're going to talk about is one that I don't see enough love for, and it's one that was a bit controversial way back in the day when it originally released, and that title is Rayman Legends Definitive Edition. Now, Rayman Legends was supposed to be a third-party exclusive title for the Nintendo Wii U, coming at a time when the Wii U was really struggling to get any attention and very much desperately needed some titles. Sadly, just before its release, it was postponed in order to get console versions out for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox. And sadly, by the time it came out, it came up against stuff like Mario 3D World, and I don't genuinely feel it got enough attention on the other consoles. Over time, it has become a little bit of a cult classic and got re-released on the Nintendo Switch. Now, interestingly enough, this is one that is fairly difficult to find as a physical release. You can always go into game or places which do code cards. A physical version will cost you around £18 to £20 depending where you go. Amazon often have this one on as reduced specials, and CX nearly always have a supply of it. But honestly, it is a really good game. If you want a really tight platforming game that I think holds up even in this day, Rayman Legends is one for you. The art style is absolutely fantastic and the entire world is just a joy to explore. There's a lot of nice multiplayer action in here, and if you have a friend or two who wants to play along, they can certainly do so. It's also, I think it's fairly challenging if you want to get the 100%. I played through this back on the Wii U because I was going to support it when it finally came out. And honestly, I had a really good time. I've yet to play through the Switch version, but I've heard nothing but good things. It's a great port of it, and if it holds up as much as the Wii U version did, it's going to be a treat for all people. Another title I'm going to talk about is one that actually kickstarted me into collecting Nintendo Switch games. I saw this on Amazon for under £10 at the time, but it's still rather cheap, at least under £20. And this is one that is actually significantly cheaper on PlayStation consoles. But for me, having this on handheld made me play it that little bit more. And that title is, well, it's two titles. The Hotline Miami Collection. Now, Hotline Miami Collection includes both Hotline Miami 1 and 2, and this is an off-the-walls, insane, brutal, I wouldn't say difficult, it's challenging, but you can learn the patterns in which you're basically a criminal and you are basically a mysterious anti-hero going on a murderous rampage against the shady underworld at the behest of voices on your answering machine. And it's one that very much pulls things apart. It's very different. It's the storyline just goes off the walls, and it's one that I felt on the Nintendo Switch was an absolutely incredible title. It's one of those ones where you will feel and feel again, and because of that, it just lends a perfect way of playing it on the Nintendo Switch handheld systems. And for that, it's one that I will always recommend. It's one that I think doesn't get enough love on consoles. It's one that was beloved years ago on the PC, but I don't really hear many people talking about this one. It was about £8.99 when I bought it a few years ago, but it's still fairly cheap. It is rising in price, however, so if it's one that you do have an interest in playing on, I would definitely recommend picking up the physical while you still can. Now, a franchise that I absolutely adore is the Lego franchise. There are just so many titles out there, and you can find them in just about every single brand new and pre-owned section. These things are everywhere, and just because they're everywhere doesn't mean that they're bad games. Honestly, I'm going to recommend the Lego collections. Now, this one is Harry Potter. I got these for £10 brand new a few months ago, but you can find just about all of the Lego games that were released on the Nintendo Switch in your local CEX, and they're not going to break the bank. For those with friends or kids, these are absolutely fantastic beginner games, and if you're a more experienced gamer, you're just going to have a fun time with them. There's nothing too challenging with them, but they are a nice little relaxing game that I just think is always worth talking about. There's absolutely tons of these Lego games on the Nintendo Switch. There's Harry Potter, there's 2 Marvel ones. I know one of the Marvel ones is getting expensive. I think the first one is fairly expensive. There's Lego City Undercover, which is my favourite Lego game, and on the Nintendo Switch you get some more Nintendo exclusive stuff. There's also stuff like I said, we've got Harry Potter, we've got Star Wars. There's a big massive Star Wars game which is around 100 hours worth of content in there, and they're all about £15 to £20, if not cheaper. There is so many of these. I always recommend them if you're trying to collect. They're always fun titles that, in my opinion, they're great. They're just really fun. And if you want to bolster your collection, a few of these, they're always worth shouting about. Now, one of the genres that I find excels on the Nintendo Switch is comfy farm simulator games. And the Nintendo Switch has a ton of them. Now, physically, Stardew Valley is actually getting fairly expensive. It's getting, I think it's about £30 brand new. CX always have it for about 35, if not more. It's one that you're probably going to want to try and pick up if you're going for a significant Nintendo Switch collection. But you don't have to break the bank. They are fantastic farming simulator titles. And one of the franchises that I absolutely adore is the Rune Factory one. Now, each and every one of these are about £15 in CEX, so yeah, you can get 3 games for £45. But not only that, there is also the Story of Seasons franchise, and there's about 3 or 4 of them on the Nintendo Switch as well, and they're all about the same price. So Rune Factory is a little bit different. So this one you build up your farm, but then you've got like you can go fight monsters, you can go like befriend the townsfolk, and much like the Story of Seasons series, you can marry into boys or girls, and yeah, it's just a nice little relaxing game, and I think these games always work well on the Nintendo Switch. I don't believe the Rune Factory games have had a PlayStation release, and Rune Factory, the most recent one, was actually infamously one of the very few physical Nintendo Switch 2 titles. I noticed that one has started to drop in price as well, but for now, Rune Factory 3, Rune Factory 4 and Rune Factory 5, you know, I mean, 15 quid, they're all decent shouts. And if you want a life sim, a farming sim game with a little bit more action based, these ones should be on your list. The next title is probably the cheapest on this list, and I actually like this game. I actually like this game quite a lot. It got a lot of negative reviews on launch because it was a full price game that is basically more of a mobile game. But this game sells for £6 in CEX. That's right, you can get a Nintendo Switch game that I consider to be pretty good for £6. And that title is Sushi Striker, Way of the Sushido. Now, I'm going to be honest, a lot of people are going to look at this and just go, no, that's an absolutely rubbish game. But honestly, I actually had a really good time with this one. Now, is it going to be one of your favourite games of all time? No, of course not. It's nowhere near. But if you want a high action sushi throwing eating game, this one probably is worth your time. So this one is basically a puzzle slash battle game in which you have to join up the sushi plates and eat as much sushi while also throwing the plates at your opponent. It gets quite difficult on the later levels, and yet there is a campaign. And I don't know, I just like this one. If you grew up with stuff like Tetris Attack or titles like that, where it's a game with a story and it's got a bit of a puzzle game, I think this one's worth a shout. I mean, like I said, £6 for a game that I think is good. Yeah, I will always recommend Sushi Striker. It's an underrated game, doesn't get nearly enough love. Yes, it is a full price game, it is not worth the value, but as a £6 game, this should be in your collection. at least to try it. I believe there is a demo, or at least there was a demo back in the day, and there is a 3DS version which is even cheaper still. This one, I think this is an underrated title. I think it's worth picking up, and at £6, you can't go wrong. At the end of the last year, we had a remake of one of my favourite titles growing up, and that title was Little Big Adventure. And Little Big Adventure Twinson's Quest is a remake of the very first Little Big Adventure game that came out all those years ago. Now, is this one of the best games of all time? Is it a good remake? It's okay. Now, it's one of those titles that I think hasn't aged particularly well. I think the tank controls on the original PC version or PlayStation version make it a lot difficult, and while it was unique, the whole changing of your mood to be, you know, sporty so you can jump gaps, or be aggressive so you can punch things, worked well when you had limited controls, but now it makes sense that they've merged it all into one. While it's lost a little bit of its identity, I genuinely still think this is a really good title to pick up. Now, this one was one that was fairly expensive when it came out, but I have noticed that it is plummeting in price, probably due to, well, a lukewarm reaction and lack of sales. But I'm going to be honest, this is a limited edition version as well. You get a nice lenticular design on there, which I'm assuming is going to be, well, you might find it in some stuff. If you buy it new, you'll get the lenticular, I'd imagine, but otherwise you'll just get the regular one. But yeah, this is honestly a really fun one. You control Twinson, a man who is starting to have mysterious dreams, and his planet is being taken over by Dr. Frunfrock and his army of clones, and you set out with your magic ball to save your sister, or in the original game it's your girlfriend. And I think this was a decent remake of a classic title. Now, I enjoyed the original that much more, and it sounds like the second one has been cancelled, which is a shame because I love that one a lot more. But I still genuinely think this is a good title. I had a lot of fun with it. The world is absolutely charming, the music is absolutely fantastic, and I believe if you get this new, you do get the soundtrack included with it as well, and that's always a plus in my opinion. But I don't know, I think this is one that I don't think it's going to set the world on fire, but I think because it's now cheap, I do recommend a lot more people to check it out and give it a try. There's a lot of fun to be had here. There's a lot of interesting concepts, especially when you look back and see how the original one was. But yeah, it's a fun enough game. I would recommend checking it out. But I hear you shouting, where are the big games? Where's all the big titles? Well, if I'm honest, Nintendo don't really drop the prices of their first party titles that much. But we do have a few titles which has our main man Mario in a very, I would say, affordable release, or at least two releases. We have Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle and Mario and Rabbids The Sparks of Hope, and you can get both of these physically for under £20. I believe. I know Ubisoft's awkward because what they do is they re-release a lot of their titles as code cards, and once them code cards start coming out, they start producing the actual physicals. So these are ones that you can find them anywhere. Mario and Rabbids is an interesting concept because it is Mario and the Rayman Rabbids in a tactical grid-based shooting game. If you've ever played XCOM, this is kind of like your very first XCOM. I enjoy these. I really had a good time with these titles. I genuinely am surprised that they didn't do as well as they did. But yeah, it's one of those ones where I know Mario and Rabbids was like very early in the Nintendo Switch lifestyle, and Rabbids came out maybe 2 or 3 years later. They're worth playing. They're a lot of fun. I had a really good time with Kingdom Battle. I've not played the second one, but I'm assuming it's going to be as good. And at the end of the day, a Mario game for under 20 quid is still worth playing. They're not as good as Mario's platforming games, but they're still worth playing, and that's always good. The fact you can get 2 Mario games for £30 together, I think that's always a good shout. And they're significantly cheaper with the code in the box ones. I know they've just released a 2-pack with both of them codes in the box, which I think is about £20. So yeah, I'm always going to recommend these games. I think these should be in any Nintendo Switch fan collection. They're really fun. They're really, really fun. The next title is one that I got in a recent Amazon sale, but if I'm honest, I really liked it. I really had a good time with it. It's not a long title, it's only about 4 or 5 hours, but if you like crazy platform and action, this is going to be one for you. And that title is Pepper Grinder. Now, this is a title in which you play as a young girl called Pepper who finds a grinder, and she sets out to reclaim her treasure by using this drill. She will drill her way through the heavens. No, that's the wrong one. She will drill her way through a bunch of really fun platforming worlds, and it's kind of unique. I don't know what it was. It just felt really fast paced. It really felt like actiony. The boss battles, in my opinion, were fairly difficult, but it just flowed so well. It's one of those titles where I think that if you are a fan of titles such as Celeste or Super Meat Boy, I think you're going to have a really good time with this one. It's a weird price. It's about, I paid about £14-15 for it a few months ago. It's kind of settled at around 18, I think, on CEX. It is short, but I have went back and done a lot more with it. I think this is one that I think will be on a lot of underrated lists in the near future. I genuinely think that it's worth at least trying it out. Maybe wait for a sale if you are a little bit unsure on, you know, the time amount that you'll get from this, because compared to nearly all of the other games on this list, this one is fairly short. But don't hold that against it. It's still incredibly fun. Now, one of the things with the Nintendo Switch is that it has a bunch of JRPGs, and if I'm honest, most of these JRPGs still end up being fairly expensive. I did have a look at all my favourite JRPGs, and all of them were still a fairly expensive buy-in. But there was an interesting one. Now, this isn't a JRPG and more a normal RPG, but it's also an indie darling, and it's one that came out significantly later compared to the PC version, and I think was a bit of a flop. But don't hold that against it. I think this is an absolute gem, and that is Loop Hero. So, a lich has thrown the world into a timeless loop and plunged its inhabitants into a never-ending chaos. You have a deck of cards in which you go around this path, this loop, and you use the deck of cards to basically add towns, add marshes, add swamps, add caves, add mountains, and you're basically constructing this little RPG world, this fantasy world around you. Of course, you fight monsters and level up, because obviously everything you put down isn't going to be safe. Obviously, the hills or the woods are going to have monsters, they're going to have goblins, they're going to have wolves and stuff like that. But as you go around, you get stronger and stronger, you get more weapons from the loot and stuff like that. You unlock different classes. There is so much going on with this title, and honestly, I think it's one that is absolutely worth shouting about. This one, I think brand new is about £15. I think even pre-owned is about £15. But it's one that I think is rather unique, and it's one that I think the box art doesn't really sell it. The box art's kind of a little bit boring, but if you want your, you know, retro-inspired titles and you want a good little RPG that's going to set yourself a few decent hours, this one, Loop Hero, definitely needs to be on your list, and I absolutely love this one. The next title is one that is going to be on the higher end of the price. I believe the Switch version pre-owned is about £20, but it's one that is very cheap on the PlayStation consoles, both PS4 and PS5, and I've played through this game twice, and I've enjoyed it twice. I played it on the Switch immediately after Tears of the Kingdom, so you know, I had a bit of a bias. I replayed it again last year on the PlayStation 5. That title is Arcade Paradise. Now, this is an interesting one. So, Arcade Paradise, you are in charge of a laundromat. That's right, and you have to do laundromat things, you know, put the clothes in to wash, spin dry them, what have you. But in the back room, there are a handful of arcade machines, and these arcade machines are remakes of a lot of popular arcade games. Over time, you will discover that the arcade side of things makes that little bit more money than the washing, the dry cleaning does. And so, you start to build an arcade paradise. And honestly, this is an absolutely fantastic title. If you love arcade games, this needs to be on your list. no questions. The remakes, I don't think any remake is quite as good as the original ones, but honestly, there's a nice blend between management simulator, getting new games, there's like little achievements where you have to try and get obviously different things in all of these games, and like I said, I don't think any of the arcade games are quite as good as the original ones. So like you get stuff like Space Invaders quite late in the campaign, but it's kind of okay. But I still had a really good time with it. There's some titles on here that I just keep going back to. There's like a number game where they built that specifically for this. And you know what? You know why this is on the list? This is local. I'm in the northeast of England. This was made locally to me, so I'm going to have that little bit of pride on here. But honestly, Arcade Paradise, if you see it and you love arcade games, check it out. The management side of things with the dry cleaning, that does get replaced, and it's still quite addicting because you've got to try and balance that, because that's what makes you the money to buy the arcade games originally. Then eventually the arcade will make more money, but it is a nice little blend and it is really good. The campaign itself is quite riveting. I really enjoyed it, with voices from the actor who played Geralt in The Witcher 3. This is one that I really enjoyed, and honestly I think you guys, if you love arcades, want to try this one out. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's going to be quite a hidden gem. This is going to be expensive. The brand new version on Amazon is expensive. I bought this a few years ago. It is expensive on Amazon, and CEX prices are creeping up. So I would recommend getting this one sooner rather than later if you can. Next up is one that again I picked up quite recently, and it is another management game. This isn't going to be for everybody, but I really liked it and I paid less than £10. It's also less than £10 on eBay and pretty much anywhere that I can find it, and that is Big Pharma. Now, Big Pharma puts you in charge of a pharmaceutical company. So what you have to do is basically make a bunch of machines to make a specific drug to cure a very specific illness. Obviously, over time, you can kind of make things have side effects or take the side effects out, or you can kind of make stronger drugs with different machines and stuff like that. It's one of those ones, if you love a tycoon game, if you love a management style game, this one is for you. It's one that I don't think is going to be for everybody, but I try to have a few different titles, a few little bit out there titles as well. This one is, I enjoy it. I personally really enjoy it. And at the end of the day, it's less than £10, it's around £10. It's one that I'm going to recommend for the price alone. I found a lot of fun with it. It's not going to be for everybody, but if you are that kind of person who wants a management title that does get quite complicated as time goes on, this one is for you. So I can hear you guys asking, and I can hear you guys in the comments going, oh, Nintendo, don't drop the prices, there's no first party titles on there. And yeah, they don't. They've kept their prices high. But there is one title that I think is worth talking about. Now, it's an awkward title because, well, it's Splatoon 2. So Splatoon 2, if you go on to CEX, you can get this for, I think it's under £20. I think it's about 15 as of when I checked this. And Splatoon 3 exists, so it's a bit of an awkward situation. But I genuinely think Splatoon 2 has a very fun campaign mode. And if you have the Nintendo Switch Online, the expensive one which has the N64 and GameCube games, you'll also get the DLC for this one. So the campaign itself, I believe, is about 10 hours, and I think the DLC was about another 5-10 hours on top. The multiplayer aspect still does exist. You can play multiplayer, it's just a lot more quieter than Splatoon 3 was. But I just thought it was worth commenting on this one. Splatoon as a franchise is still really fun. It's still a really fun franchise, and yeah, this is basically my, oh yeah, some first party games are there. I mean, yeah, it's one. I mean, I can't help the fact that Nintendo don't drop the prices, but I think it's worth checking it out. It's not as good as free because free is still active online, but campaign is still worth checking out. And to get a first party title for very cheap, it's always worth shouting about. Now, earlier on I spoke about JRPGs and how there's not many of them that's cheap, and that is still true. However, there is a spin-off to one of the greatest JRPGs of all time, which is cheap, and I really like this one. At any point of time I will try and talk about this one. but it's also one that I was genuinely surprised to see as cheap. Now, there are two versions of this on the Nintendo Switch. The first one's cheap, the second one isn't, but the first one's still a lot of fun. That title is Dragon Quest Builders. Now, I have bought this title so many times. I bought this from Japan. I imported it when it first came out. I expected it to never get released. I then bought the PlayStation 4 version when it did get released in English, and I then went back and bought Dragon Quest Builders on the Nintendo Switch, and I then bought Dragon Quest Builders 2 on the Switch, and then bought it again on the PlayStation 4 so I could get the trophies because I love that franchise so much. So, if you've ever played Minecraft and ever wanted story, actual story, Dragon Quest Builders is for you. Now, this is a spin-off to the absolutely fantastic Dragon Quest franchise in which you play basically the campaign of the first game, kind of, and you've got to go around rebuilding the towns that have been basically decimated. Like I said, it is a Minecraft style game where you're going around collecting supplies and then rebuilding stuff, but there's a lot of nice combat on here as well. It's a very, very fun game. And I'm going to mention Dragon Quest Builders 2. It's a lot more expensive, but honestly, if you've got the first one and liked it, Dragon Quest Builders 2 expands on things so much more. There's an actual hub world you can build stuff on. Obviously, the campaign's a lot longer and a lot bigger. There's a lot more weird things you can do with it. But honestly, Dragon Quest Builders, I think if you're a Nintendo Switch collector, this one needs to be on your list. And I'm genuinely surprised at how cheap this one goes for, at least in CEX. Absolutely must have for anybody who wants to collect for Nintendo Switch, likes Minecraft, wants a little bit of story. The campaign's quite meaty as well. I'm sure the campaign's about 30 hours long. And just wants to have a really good time with a game. Dragon Quest Builders is on your must list. But hey, all of that is my opinion. I've given you guys a bunch of titles that I really enjoyed and think is worth picking up. But over to you guys. Let me know in the comments, what titles have you picked for under £20 and still under £20 that you think are worth checking out? Have I missed something obvious? Have I missed something that is insanely good but is insanely cheap? Let me know, because hey, I can always do a second version of this video. If you like this, leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time for more Switch games, retro games, CX hunting, and everything else in between. Of course, more tea. See you there.